What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another video. We are back from the 2024 King of the Hammers. And let me just tell you guys, it was a fantastic experience. So much fun. All of the long days, hard work, long nights, the frustration, the busted knuckles on this build was all worth it. It was a fantastic experience and I can't wait to share the entire thing with you guys. Now, before I start rambling away on the Jeep, kind of what happened, what went good, what went bad, what I would change, and actually show you guys the race, I want to step back a little bit, and this video is going to be focused on kind of leading up to the actual race day. Once we got out there to Johnson Valley, what all we did to get this thing ready for the race. There's a ton of footage to share with you guys, both on my end, and the Coast Guard media team was out there as well, and they got some fantastic footage that I'm super excited not only to look through, but also to share with you guys. So, before we get started, and I just want to say the Jeep made it back here in one piece, safe and sound. That was one thing I was a little bit worried about, putting all the time and effort into building this rig and then just trashing it out there in Johnson Valley. But everything went good. It was a wonderful first year experience, and I'm gonna say it, I'm hooked. I cannot wait for next year, and hopefully we'll be able to hit some other Ultra 4 races here this season after tinkering a little bit on the rig. But in this video, we're gonna go through and kind of catch you guys up to speed and go from there. We have officially made it to Johnson Valley, King of the Hammers. Yesterday, I started setting up the booth, or the pit here, getting everything somewhat laid out, and as you can tell, we've been working a little bit on the rig, and took it out yesterday just for some preliminary testing. It was doing good. Now this morning, we were meeting up with AccuTune Off-Road to do some shock tuning and get these shocks dialed in. So next 10 minutes, we're gonna head out, find them, and see what shock tuning consists of. There are some external adjustments we can do here on the bypass shocks, but we're gonna take it for a few rips with Ryan at AccuTune, and he's gonna see what changes we need to make to really make sure this thing handles the high-speed stuff well. If we do have to go further than the external adjustments, we're gonna have to pull the shocks, pull the coilovers off, and that's where the magic happens, and pull apart the shocks and revalve them, reshim them, and make this thing float. Let's go see what's gonna happen today. The first thing we're gonna do is pull all the coilovers out, and since these are just standard spec Fox coilovers, he's gonna go ahead and work his magic inside there and throw some better quality valving in there, and then we're gonna put the coilovers back in, take it for a few loops, and start tuning from there. So we have the beautiful JL out here, Mike's here to help, and nothing better than pulling the shocks out on the Lakebed.
A little bit too much rebound in them. Just kind of pulling the front end in just a little bit.
Okay.
And then the rear, I think we need to move the dual reach nuts up. Yeah, I took some rebound out of the coilovers and a little bit of compression. They were pretty stiff because there's just a standard tune that Fox ships them with. So we got a little bit closer to what this is going to want.
Heck yeah. So now at this point, it's time to go and kind of fine tune on the bypasses externally and dial her in.
just pull a little bit of rebound out of the front bypasses here, and should help to keep the front end up on top of the whoops instead of diving in a little bit.
Yeah. So while he's doing that, we're going to adjust the our nuts on the rear coilovers. So we're going to bring these down a little bit closer to our slider to engage the secondary spring a little bit earlier on, which should help in the rear. The other 3 shocks are done. Time to put them back in and go test it out once again. Like I mentioned, when we were building the, going through and doing all the shock mounts and figuring out where these were going to mount, I mentioned that it's super important to make sure that it's easy to pull your shocks out. You know, a lot of people will build a rig and you have to jack up one corner, put it at an angle, and pry your shock to get the bolt in. Is not what you want to do, because you know, we would have been here all day fighting bolts. I mean, we're still here all day, but luckily they come out pretty smooth. How often do you see that?
A lot.
Yeah.
I had one where it was on the back of a Tacoma,
yeah,
and it was bottoming out on the shocks, and it bent the bolt. We had to drill a hole through the gas cap in the bedside and like punch the bolt out, and it was half a day just to get one bolt out, you know?
Yep.
And it's like, yeah,
and okay, when this goes out, we're whatever we're putting in this, that's your last shot.
Yeah.
Cool.
Sweet.
So there was a tremendous difference in shock tuning and how this Jeep handled, not only on the high speed whoops, but also how it handled just driving around town or driving around the Lakebed, and how it cornered, how it flexed over the rocks. Night and day difference. We're not running any sway bars on the Jeep, and after the tuning, this thing just felt so much more planted. Now, AccuTune did give us some pre-shock tuning on the bypasses when we ordered them. Unfortunately, when we ordered these, it was way early on in the build, and I gave them all the info that I had at the time and kind of some estimated weights. Unfortunately, the Jeep ended up a lot heavier than expected. But prior to that, when we took this thing out to test at Crossbar, it felt fantastic. So whatever they did worked, but they just made it work so much better on site when we were doing the shock tuning with Ryan. He went through, we actually pulled the shocks and coilovers, I think 3 or 4 times. It was probably like an 8-hour ordeal. Pulling the shocks, he would open them up, reshim them, revalve them. We'd go back out, do some more testing, see if we needed to make any more changes, swing back in, make some changes. It was a long ordeal, but definitely worth it. Being able to actually put this Jeep to use and give it the full potential. So I never realized how much of a difference shock tuning made, not only on a race Jeep, but just how it reacted in general on the trails, low speed, high speed, all around. It is fantastic how much a difference shock tuning makes. But beyond that, we had to get ready at that point, get the pit set up, get the Jeep ready for tech, because this is a brand new rig. We had to go through the full chassis tech before the race day tech. So the next few days were spent getting ready for tech, going around the Jeep, tightening everything up, and we were able to take it out a little bit and do some rock trails, you know, just to give it a little shakedown run. So we headed over to Turkey Claw and took this thing up the rocks there, and it did fantastic.
Go ahead and drop in. I'm gonna cruise up here and park, and then I'll walk up, watch it.
So at that point, you know, it's a balance. How much do you want to pre-run, or how much do you want to actually abuse the rig? Because, you know, we didn't have another vehicle out there to pre-run all the rock trails, pre-run the desert section, and it seemed like every time we were taking it out, we weren't really hurting the rig, but something would come up that we would have to fix. So in my mind, let's just give it our best shot and go from there. So we made our way up Turkey Claw. Trot was watching us, kind of spotting, looking out for the rig, making sure nothing needed addressed before race day. And it's not exactly the hardest trail out there, but there are some challenging spots where you really have to pick a good line, otherwise you're smashing your front diff, you're getting turtled, and you are gonna have to winch. And for those of you who watched King of the Hammers live, you probably noticed that was a huge bottleneck area. There was a ton of people sitting there waiting for people to either fix their crap or get winched out. And unfortunately, fortunately, we did pass a bunch of people on Turkey Claw on race day. But looking back, I probably would have chose those harder lines sooner instead of kind of sitting there waiting, debating, should we go and pass these guys, and just passed them right off the beginning because the rig was doing phenomenal. And in the rocks, not trying to brag, but I do feel more comfortable in the rocks than the open desert section. So I'm excited to show you all that footage of race day because the rig was just doing fantastic. But back to the story. So we made our way up Turkey Claw. Trot was watching. At some point, he turned around and headed back to camp. Mike and I decided to keep going and get into the flat section of the lake bed and really see what the Jeep could do. Now, this footage of us bombing through, the hood-mounted GoPro does not do it justice. It makes the Jeep look a lot slower than it is. So that shot right there was about 75 miles an hour, and still muddy, still really slick, and that's about as safe as we felt going in those conditions. But just keep that in mind whenever you're watching all of this other footage. That was 75, so the ones that look like we're going even faster are even faster than that. It's crazy how when you mount a GoPro up high, how it really distorts not only the terrain, but also the speed. But we made it back to camp, continued working on the Jeep, getting it ready for qualifying day. Qualifying is one of those things where it's controversial for the EMC. It's not mandatory, but it does dictate your spot on the starting line. So in my mind, I would rather start ahead of people. And secondly, it was 2 days before the race, so I'd want to find any weak points in the Jeep prior to actually doing the race. And I'm glad we did. During qualifying, we blew 2 front tires. The first one was the front driver tire, literally probably a mile out of the gate, and I'll put that footage up here soon. But we blew that tire, swapped it out, decided to keep going, blew the passenger tire right before coming down Resolution. So we continued down Resolution with a flat front tire, just banging on rocks. And about halfway down Resolution, the power steering just was gone. So we hopped out and found out that our power steering filter, the O-ring blew out. And we're not exactly sure what the cause was. The O-ring was still torqued down, still tight, wasn't over tightened, didn't get loose. It was marked with torque seal. I think that one of the impacts of the tire kind of shock loaded the power steering system and blew out the easiest point possible, which was the filter O-ring. So we lost all the fluid from there, going down Resolution with a flat tire and no power steering and a 2-to-1 steering quickener, which is amazing, by the way, but when you don't have power steering, you actually have to double your input. So between those 3, it was almost impossible to steer this thing down Resolution, which is a big rock hill. So pulled over to the side, and that was it for qualifying, but at least we tried it. And the big thing looking back is that we then knew the first thing was, hey, we're gonna have to keep our tires safe during race day because there is no tire sponsor behind this build. And I only went out there with a set of 8 or 9 tires, which I figured out pretty quickly. You need a lot more out there at Hammers because guys are going through tires left and right. Now, luckily, Andrew Gorman was able and kind enough to hook us up with 2 of his used 37s. That way on race day, we could have them scattered throughout the main pit, remote pit 1 and remote pit 2, kind of have 2 tires at each pit in case we needed them, plus the 1 spare on the back. But long story short, if we didn't qualify, I wouldn't have known about the power steering filter issue. And I think what happened was just that tire impact, and I think I was holding the wheel just a little too hard. With the 2-to-1 quickener, it doesn't translate all of that steering feedback all the way up to the steering wheel, just because it's a 2-to-1. So it magnifies the movement of the steering wheel to the wheels 2 times. So if you're holding it a little bit too tight, it can easily shock load the system. So I was able to translate that over to race day and just kind of loosely hold the steering wheel. That way it did what it needed to do without shock loading the system. So in the end, qualifying cost a lot of money because of the 2 tires, but it also, prevented me from having any steering issues on race day. And it kind of scared the heck out of Mike and I about the tire situation, because going through 2 tires in the matter of 10 minutes was not ideal when we had a 6 to 8 hour race ahead of us. And luckily, we made it through the race, all 111 miles that we made it, on these 4 tires, didn't have one flat whatsoever. So it kind of scarred us and made us to look out for rocks, which in the end helped. As we close this video out, I do have some questions for you guys. I have a ton of content to go back and edit of, the actual race day. We filled up 2 SD cards, both 512 gigabytes each. That's over 1 terabyte of footage. But I want to know what you guys want to see. So my plan is, I do want to get the Jeep up in the air and take a look at all the parts, see how they held up. We did not take it easy on the Jeep, and we didn't push it all the way to its limit, but we definitely did put this thing through its paces. So a lot of the parts that we ran are available for, your street-driven Jeep. So that's pretty cool. But I want to lift it up, walk around the rig, see what survived, see what didn't. And then we actually need to give the whole backstory of race day, what happened, how'd it go, and put out a video with all of that content as well. So there's multiple videos coming up, and then unfortunately, it's time to close the KOH chapter and, revisit it next year. I know a lot of people are going to want to see some of the race highlights, but part of me just wants to put out the full race on video. It's going to be like an 8-hour video. I'm not going to say unedited, because we will be going between the forward-facing camera, the back-facing camera, and I'd love to kind of hop in and chime in about different scenarios and talk about what was happening at that point in the race. But unedited in a sense where it is from start to where we finished, or to where we stopped, should I say. Just to really give a sense of what it's like to be out there and to give it your all during the race. Because, you can watch a ton of videos, but until you're actually sitting there in the driver's seat or the passenger seat for 160 miles, 7 hours, however long it takes you, you don't really realize that you have to pay attention to what's going on every single moment through the desert, through the rocks, through the trails in between. You look away for 1 second, and next thing you know, your rig's trashed. So it is a very challenging race, but there's a lot that goes into it. And I think a lot of you guys would be interested to see the whole thing, whether you watch it or not, just kind of cycle through it. I do want to put that out there. So if you have any ideas on what else would be some good content, what else you guys want to see, let me know down in the comments. And I want to thank all of you for your support throughout the entire build and throughout the race. I'll see you guys next week or the next video. Who knows how soon it'll be. We'll see you later.